Aye. Michael Holmes.
Hello, everyone. This is High Point Mayor Jay Wagner. I'm now calling the special meeting of the High Point City Council for May 3rd, 2021 to order. I'll begin by calling the roll, and I'll state that here present at City Hall, I'm present at City Hall, as is Councilman Cyril Jefferson, Victor Jones, Wesley Hudson, Chris Williams. We also have several who are with us remotely. Councilman Michael Holmes, are you with us remotely? Councilman Holmes, are you with us? Councilman Holmes, are you with us?
Just remuted himself.
How about Councilman Johnson? Are you with us?
Mayor, I'm present.
Okay. I think Councilman Holmes is here, but maybe we're having trouble. Okay. Councilman Holmes, are you with us? I believe Councilman Moore, Mayor Pro Tem, is going to be a little bit late, and Councilwoman Peters may be with us later. There is a quorum present, so we're going to go ahead and get started. First thing on the agenda tonight is actually going to be a closed session for purposes of attorney-client privilege. Following that, we're going to have a presentation on the Triangle Lake Road bond project and the City Lake Park renovation bond project. Those will be done in open session when we come out of closed session. So with that, I'll make the motion to go into closed session. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded, I believe, by Councilman Williams. Is there any objection to by any council members present to going into closed session? Okay, hearing none, then we are now in closed session. I'll turn it over to Ryan Ferguson for instructions on how to get into the closed session. Okay, so this is Mayor Jay Wagner. We're now back out of our closed session. We have a couple items for a presentation for the special meeting. The first one is a presentation of the Triangle Lake Road bond project, and I believe our transportation staff, Mr. McDonald, will be handling that. He's standing behind the lectern, so I'm making an assumption here.
Okay.
Mark, good to see you.
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Wagner, members of council, and all that may be joining us virtually for this meeting today. We want to present you and other local officials and staff in a progress report on the Triangle Lake Road bond project. You probably know that improvements to Triangle Lake Road from Hickory Chapel Road to Martin Luther King Jr. Drive have been discussed for many years. Originally, road improvements and safety enhancements for pedestrians and cyclists were proposed by the Transportation Department as part of the 2004 bond referendum. But at the time, it did not make the cut. About 5 years later, Transportation retained the consulting firm Kimley Horn & Associates to conduct a detailed feasibility study that looked at alternative alignments, cross-sections, and potential impacts on surrounding residential communities and the natural environment. Completed in 2009, probable costs were estimated at $7.6 million, inclusive of typical utility adjustments and relocations and the mitigation of identified environmental impacts. This cost estimate did not, however, include the replacement of aging or obsolete water and sanitary sewer lines or other private utilities serving the area. 10 years later, in 2019, a new $22 million transportation bond package was presented to our citizens. Triangle Lake Road was one of 3 major road improvement projects recommended by staff for funding consideration. High Point voters approved this referendum by a wide margin, and in 2020, the Transportation Department asked Kimley Horn to revisit the feasibility document and functional plans that were additionally prepared for the project. Mr. Colin Frosch, a professional engineer and project manager at Kimley Horn, is with us today to present the results of this new evaluation and to address any questions you may have. Also joining us virtually are local officials and staff representing various departments and agencies who have an interest in this project. A virtual public meeting is scheduled for 2 weeks from now, Tuesday, May the 18th at 6 p.m. After public comments have been received, reviewed, and appropriately incorporated into the concept for Triangle Lake Road, the design phase of the project will begin. Currently, we anticipate construction to start in 2023. Thank you, and now I'll turn the presentation over to Colin.
Thank you, Mark, and it's a pleasure to be here with the city today. It's been our honor to work with the city through this process to hopefully move this project forward and to help improve the Triangle Lake Road corridor. So today what I'm going to do is give you a brief overview of the studies that we've completed to date from an environmental and an engineering perspective, and then go through some of the components of our proposed concept design. As Mark said, this concept right now is the proposed version, and what we're hoping to do before going to final design later this year is to gather public comments, gather feedback from local officials like yourselves and agencies that are online with us today as well, incorporate those into the design, and then move forward with final design later this year. As Mark mentioned, this project is evaluating improvements to Triangle Lake Road from Hickory Chapel Drive to East Martin Luther King Jr. Drive on the northeast. So throughout this presentation, you'll note that I discuss Triangle Lake Road as heading east-west between Hickory Chapel and Baker Road, and north and south between MLK Drive and Baker Road. So today we're going to go through the background, the preliminary study results, as well as the proposed design, and then we'll briefly touch on how we're going to involve the public later on this month and how those comments and concerns shared by the public will be put into action. As Mark mentioned, this project is primarily funded by the city's 2019 transportation bond referendum of an estimated $12 million for this project alone. Based on our discussions with the city and our preliminary studies, we've identified the formal purpose of this project as improving access for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit users. An additional benefit of this project is to improve safety for all users, including drivers as well. So first, I want to touch base on the existing conditions of the corridor. First, looking at the segment on the southwest between Hickory Chapel Road and Oakcrest Avenue, as you can see on your screen. It's currently a 2-lane section. Those lanes are approximately 10 feet wide, and you'll note in this picture that there's not a lot of area on the outside of the pavement. We call this a recovery zone. If a driver was to make an error, that they could safely correct that error and get back on the roadway. Currently, the existing drainage ditches are so close to the road and steep that if a wheel were to exit the paved surface, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to recover that vehicle. You'll also notice that due to the horizontal and the vertical geometry of the roadway, there are some areas where there are limited sight distances, which could present concerns for stopping sight distances or being able to see oncoming traffic or obstacles. There's also multiple single-family residential driveways and side streets that connect directly onto Triangle Lake Road. There's also no curb or gutter present and no pedestrian or bicycle facilities for those types of users. I will also note that there are multiple transit facilities on this corridor right now, and so users that are trying to access those have to navigate either walking on the edge of the roadway, as you can see where there's not a lot of room to do so, or in a private property or in the drainage ditch. So not an ideal situation for those transit users at this moment. On the other side of the project, we have a little bit of wider typical section. So this is up near MLK Drive. Here we have a 4-lane typical section that was improved in more recent years. In some segments, there is an existing sidewalk at the back of curb, and that is mostly on the west side. Here, next to MLK Drive, you can see there's an existing section of sidewalk on the east side as well. But for the most part, it's just a standard 4-lane section with about 11-foot wide lanes. The next thing we did was we looked at the existing crash observations that have occurred within the last 5 years. So we're going to talk about the frequency of crashes, the types of crashes that have occurred, identify high crash concentration areas, and then make some engineering recommendations based off those findings. So first, looking here, we identified where there were pedestrian and bicycle involved crashes. You can see, coincidentally, most of them were at locations near to or directly adjacent to an existing High Point bus stop. So here near Sales Street, here again near Roberts Lane and Paramount Street, and then over here near the United Methodist Church. Thankfully, there was no fatal pedestrian and bicycle crashes that were identified within the 5-year period, but multiple that resulted in injuries for either the pedestrians or the bicyclists. This map here shows the frequency of crashes in terms of a color map. So in areas where you see the darker red, those are higher concentrations of higher frequency crashes over the last 5 years. And then it decreases to areas in green where there was a lower crash frequency. You can see the highest concentration of crashes occurred between Hickory Chapel Road and Sales Street, and then the other key locations for crashes occurred at Paramount Street, Baker Road, and Oakcrest Avenue. In terms of the types of crashes, about 44%, almost half of the crashes, were run off the road or fixed object crashes, and about 58% of those crashes resulted in only property damage. So if you think back to some of the pictures, you might have noticed when we were out there, there was, I think it was trash day. So there was trash receptacles right on the side of the road, and because there's no shoulder, there's nowhere else to store them other than right on the side of the road. And because there's no sidewalk or curb facilities, similarly, the mailboxes have to be located directly at the back of that shoulder. So those present what we call fixed objects immediately adjacent to the road. And then run off the road crashes, as I mentioned earlier, because there's no recovery area, it's very difficult if someone were to maybe look down for a minute or avoid a pedestrian or an animal, that they'd very easily get stuck off the side of the road. The other thing we looked at was the crash rate. So this is the number of crashes that occur per the million vehicle miles traveled over that course of the 5-year period. Triangle Lake Road over the past 5 years has experienced about 540 crashes per 100 million vehicle miles traveled, as compared to about 344 crashes on the statewide average. So this was something that we identified as being a trigger that we would want to look at some other safety improvements. Based on these results, we want to recommend a couple things. First, we want to look at realigning the roadway where feasible to be able to improve the sight distance for drivers. We also want to make the typical section wider. So this is how much pavement width there is there, so that the roadway can be more recoverable. There's two main ways of doing this. We can either put in a curb and gutter, which would keep the drivers on the roadway, or you could add a wider shoulder with potentially rumble strips outside of the travel lanes. We also looked at whether a two-way left turn lane was needed. The previous feasibility study that was conducted in 2013 assumed a two-way left turn lane throughout the entire corridor. What we did was we went back and looked at, is that actually warranted, or could we use that width along the narrow corridor to be used instead for pedestrian and bicycle facilities, which were not previously incorporated. And what we identified was that the types of crashes that are prevented with a two-way left turn lane, which are normally head-on crashes and rear-end crashes, were not the highest frequency crashes on this corridor. So we deemed that a two-way left turn lane was not warranted based off of the crash data. We also looked at the intersections. So these intersections could be improved by installing all-way stop controlled intersections, such as a four-way stop or a signal or a roundabout. So those would encourage all drivers to slow down, and as compared to the current situation, drivers on Triangle Lake Road have the through movement. So they're not having to slow down and yield to pedestrians or bicyclists that are sharing the road. And of course, additional street lighting can also help improve nighttime crashes as well, make obstacles, bicyclists and pedestrians more visible to drivers as they progress through the corridor. The next thing we looked at was the existing traffic on the corridor. We wanted to study the intersections and then make some recommendations based off of those. First, to see what types of intersections we should propose, and if a two-way left turn lane was warranted for a traffic perspective, or if we needed dedicated left turn lanes at any of these intersections to provide enough turning movements for those drivers. You can see here we identified the 5 main intersections at Oak Crest, Baker Road, Grand Street, Paramount Street, and Hickory Chapel Road. And from this traffic analysis, we found that at Hickory Chapel Road, a 4-way stop, a single lane roundabout, or maintaining the 2-way stop control intersection would all work acceptably. So from the city's perspective, for the current conceptual design, it was decided that a single lane roundabout would be incorporated because it provides additional benefits in terms of mobility for drivers, as it presents a free-flowing type of intersection. It also creates benefits for safety of pedestrians and bicyclists. So you'll see when we get to the conceptual design that a single lane roundabout has been incorporated this time. At Baker Road, very similarly, we found that a single lane roundabout, an all-way stop control intersection, or realigning the intersection and constructing a left turn lane with a 2-way stop would all perform acceptably. And like I said, for Hickory Chapel Road, same thing at Baker Road applies as well. The city decided to incorporate at this phase in the design a single lane roundabout so that those mobility and safety benefits could be realized. At the other intersections, we concluded that a left turn lane was not warranted based on the low volumes along Triangle Lake Road and the low number of drivers that are wanting to turn left on any of these side streets. And there is no dedicated left turn lanes. So that means throughout the entire corridor, a 2-lane typical section is applicable. We won't need to widen the roadway at any spots to add any turn lanes. All right, so now we want to take a moment and look at some of the constraints from an environmental perspective along the corridor. It's a very busy corridor with a lot of residences, as I mentioned earlier, on the west side of the road, and then more of an industrial and community institutional resources on the northeast side. So first, looking at streams and wetlands, You'll notice that we have 3 major crossings along the corridor that are either existing pipes or culverts. With widening of the roadway, we're most likely going to need to either have to replace or extend those structures to be able to meet the NCDOT requirements for drainage. We do anticipate that we'll be able to stay within what's called a nationwide permit threshold for permitting purposes from the Corps of Engineers. But at this crossing here near Oakcrest, there is the possibility of it being pushed to an individual permit, which still allows the project to go forward, but would just need to go through a little bit of additional analysis and coordination with the Corps. We also have floodplains associated with all 3 of those streams as well. You'll notice that Triangle Lake and then this stream here, identified as stream SB, also flow very in a parallel nature to the roadway. So that constrains us a little bit, as any movement towards that side of the roadway to those streams could greatly increase the number of impacts that we have to those streams. So we're working within those constraints to design a roadway that minimizes those impacts while still meeting the purpose of the project. As I mentioned earlier, there's multiple City of High Point transit stops along this corridor. Now, the route that runs along this corridor is a circulator route, so it only runs from the north side to the southwest side. So all of the stops are either on the west or the north side of Triangle Lake Road. We also have multiple businesses, as shown here in green, some City of High Point facilities, shown in orange and purple for the fire station, and then the Williams Memorial CME Church and Union Hill Cemetery. So some trip generators from a traffic perspective, in addition to all of the private residences and apartment complexes that are on the western side of the corridor. So now let's jump into the proposed improvements. So what we're going to do here is talk about the typical section that we're proposing, some of the intersection modifications in more detail, the alignment, how we're going to propose improvements there, and then what we propose to do with the existing bus stops. So first, on the western half of the project, between Hickory Chapel Road and just north of Oakcrest Avenue, before right at that stream crossing that we were just discussing, we're proposing to apply a 2-lane typical section with 11-foot travel lanes, 5-foot bike lanes, curb and gutter, a grass strip, and then a 5-foot sidewalk. So a couple things I'll point out about this typical section. The standard lane width for an NCDOT roadway or a state route, as this roadway is, would have a 12-foot travel lane and a 4-foot bike lane. By shifting some of that width away from the travel lane and towards the bike lanes, we create a larger buffer to provide safety for the bicyclists. We also encourage slower speeds for those drivers as well. So as your lane narrows as a driver, you are subconsciously driving slower as you feel that the roadway is narrower and more confined. So a 12-foot travel lane could encourage higher speeds, which is why we went with the 11-foot travel lane here to hopefully encourage that 35-mile-per-hour speed limit that is out there. I'll also note that although in this typical section we're showing a 4.5-foot wide grass strip, there are some locations near culvert crossings and utility poles where we've pulled that sidewalk to the back of curb to help reduce impacts to either properties or to streams. And in those locations, the sidewalk becomes a little bit wider. So it's actually a 6-foot sidewalk at the back of curb in those locations. To better help you visualize what this is going to look like, you have a picture here near Grand Street, just west of Baker Road. So on the left, you can see the existing conditions, and on the right, a simulation of what the proposed condition may look like. As I mentioned, it would still be 2 lanes with 5-foot bike lanes on either side. Here you can actually see a proposed pedestrian crossing at Grand Street with the high visibility markings, and a bus stop with a pad that is proposed here as well. And then you can also see the curb and gutter, grass strip, and 5-foot sidewalk. You'll note that we are getting closer to a lot of the residences along this corridor. That's just the nature of widening and adding the pedestrian and bicycle facilities. But currently in the design, we don't anticipate any relocations with this project. Now, certainly, we have not gotten final survey. We have to look at tying the project into that final topographical survey that we get from a surveyor. So that is subject to change. But at this point, we've been able to reduce impacts to properties to hopefully avoid relocations as we move forward. On the second half of the corridor on the north side, so this goes from Oakcrest Avenue to Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. Okay. We are proposing a 3-lane typical section with bike lanes and sidewalks. Now, the reason we're proposing a 3-lane typical section here is because if you'll remember back to a few slides ago, the existing typical section in this segment of the corridor is currently 4 lanes. So if we take the existing curb and leave it where it is, we can reconfigure that exact same pavement surface and add in bike lanes by reducing the number of travel lanes for drivers. We'll still be able to maintain a two-way left turn lane, and really the traffic that's out there today doesn't warrant that 4-lane typical section. So we don't anticipate any negative traffic effects coming from reducing the number of through lanes on this corridor. We do propose milling and resurfacing and doing some super elevation and vertical alignment corrections or improvements in this corridor. So you still will see construction along this portion of the project, but it'll be not adding any impacts outside of the existing footprint of the roadway. We'll also add a sidewalk on the east side of the project where you saw it currently ends just south of Martin Luther King Jr. Drive. So here's again a simulation on the right of the area just south of the Williams Memorial CME Church. Now at this location we're actually proposing a pedestrian crossing with a median refuge island. In discussing with the transit authority here in High Point, they identified this as one of the high volume bus stops along the corridor. So for the time being, we've supplemented the bus pad at this bus stop location with a shelter. And because the trip generator, being the church, is on the opposite side of the roadway, we're proposing a pedestrian crossing with the refuge island here in place of the 2-way left turn lane. And you can see here the high visibility markings, the bike lanes, and then further on in the simulation, you can see where the middle of the roadway transitions back to that 2-way left turn lane. All right, so now let's go and talk about some of the intersections. So we're mainly going to talk about Hickory Chapel Road and Baker Road. As I mentioned earlier, these are both proposed to be single-lane roundabouts. One thing I'll call your attention to is how we handle the bike facilities at these roundabouts. So along the corridor of Triangle Lake Road, we're proposing to have that 5-foot sidewalk and 5-foot bike lane. It's not ideal for us to have the bicyclists on the inside of the roundabout with the drivers as they try to navigate which road they want to turn onto. So our solution for that is a bike ramp that would then ramp the bicyclists here, if they're traveling in the westbound direction, up to the sidewalk, which would then widen to be a 10-foot wide, what we're going to call a multi-use path. They could then circumvent the roundabout to whichever direction they please, get back on the roadway, or use the sidewalk facility. So this is a major bicycle corridor. I believe it's City of High Point bike route number 9. So this will provide a good facility for the bicyclists that want to continue to use that route to be able to do so in a safer manner. Another thing I want to point out, in the southwest quadrant of this roundabout, we're currently proposing to modify the driveway access to this private property. The existing driveway is located here on the north side of the property, which would bring their access too close to the circulation of the roundabout. And by moving their access to the east side of the property, that would then allow them to have more direct access to Hickory Chapel Road, but still be able to access Triangle Lake Road by way of the roundabout. So it's a slight modification, but at this point, we don't anticipate it being a relocation. We've also been able to reduce the impacts to the business on the southeast side of the corridor and the fire station on the northeast side.
I got a question before you move on real quick.
Yes, sir.
To the west of that roundabout and the property that's south, second from the curve to your right, just one, yeah. It's like kind of a hill in front of their place. Would that affect like any flooding and so forth? Because I think the yard goes like this.
Yes, so there is some steep topography there. Also note we're proposing to decrease the width of Triangle Lake Road in front of that house. I don't know if you can see this kind of gray transparent area with the black diagonal lines through it. That's where the existing pavement is, because it's a 4-lane section that comes into the Hickory Chapel Road intersection at that point. And so we're going to be moving the curb and gutter away from that house. By adding curb and gutter, we'll also be incorporating drainage pipes to control the stormwater. So at this level of design, we haven't evaluated that, but by pulling the roadway away from the house and by adding curb and gutter, I would anticipate that it wouldn't have an adverse effect on the house, could actually provide a benefit by controlling the stormwater. But again, it'll be something we evaluate in the final design process.
Thank you.
All right, so moving on to the Baker Road intersection. So we realigned this intersection a little bit to make it more suitable for a single lane roundabout. As you can see, again, we have the use of the bike ramps to pull the bicyclists off of the roadway and onto the multi-use path as they circumvent the roundabout. Other than that, we've tried to minimize the right-of-way impacts at this location as much as possible. You can see the intersection has been moved a little bit to the east, and the only modifications that we're currently proposing to access on these properties is at the High Point Furniture Sales. Currently, they have 2 driveway access points on Baker Road. One here, which is the main one, which is paved, and another here, which is their overflow parking and is their service entrance for drop-off vehicles. Currently, with the proposed roundabout design, that driveway location would not work with the roundabout, as it, again, much like the property at Hickory Chapel, would present the driveway too close to the circulation of the roundabout. So we've moved it to the north side of the property where they'd be able to still have full access, but this time to Triangle Lake Road instead of Baker Road.
Again, okay, coming off of the old entrance, service entrance, is, where you just had your cursor, is that where their bays, the dock bays are?
Yes, their dock bay is right here.
Okay, then I'm good.
Yeah. So we need to look at this in more detail during final design, but we do think that we'd be able to provide sufficient access for their delivery trucks to enter the property and make the maneuver necessary to be able to back in and to load or unload furniture. Okay. There's one other location that we want to talk about in terms of design, and that's near the Oakcrest Avenue intersection. This is also where we have the parallel stream and one of the major culvert crossings. With this segment of the design, we're proposing to actually raise the roadway by at most 10 feet in the area. It does not have a good sight line right now for the drivers, so that would improve it. It's also going to reduce the impacts to the stream. And you can see here that we're also pulling the roadway more towards the east, away from this residence here and away from the existing stream, again, to reduce the amount of impacts to those stream resources. You can also see in the thick black lines, those are proposed retaining walls to reduce the impacts to either properties or stream resources. Because this is going to be a pretty major construction operation at this intersection, at this time, we anticipate that this portion of Triangle Lake Road will need to be closed potentially during construction or for at least a period of time. But the good side is we do anticipate that we'll be able to maintain access to both of these properties. And then north of this corridor, you have the school, the City of High Point facility, and the church, which will all be able to maintain their access to MLK Drive and 85. And then just south of here is Baker Road, and we also have the neighborhood network as well. So even though we're having to close this small segment of Baker Road for a short time to be able to construct the culvert crossing, we do believe we'll be able to maintain the traffic throughout the other areas of the project. So we don't think it's going to have an adverse effect to the overall network. The last thing we want to talk about in terms of design is the proposed bus stop locations. As I mentioned earlier, there's multiple bus stops along the corridor today. We're proposing to consolidate those in coordination with the transit authority here to end up just having 5 bus stops along the corridor. So you'll have one here by the elementary school and City of High Point facility, one on Roberts Lane and Grand Street, one closer to Sales Street, and then the other just west of Hickory Chapel Road. The 5th and final one would be the proposed bus stop with the shelter, as you saw previously in that rendering. And we'll continue to work with the transit authority during the final design process to see what types of infrastructure is needed at these transit stops, whether it's seats or trash cans or signage or more shelters. we'll be able to evaluate that further in the final design process. So coming up, we've got a series of public involvement events scheduled. First, today's local officials meeting. In 2 weeks from now, we have a virtual public meeting that the public has been invited to attend. That is May 18th at 6 p.m., and they can join that online. We've also reached out to the public via newsletters that are being mailed, should be arriving this week. Today, we also went door to door and put flyers on any individual's front door or doorknob that lives along the Triangle Lake Road corridor within our study area. We're also coordinating with the city. We have a website that you can visit at highpointnc.gov/Triangle Lake Road. And we've provided printed materials that will be posted here at the Customer Service Center on the second floor of City Hall and at the Fire Station number 9, which is located along the corridor. So that way, if there's anyone that is unable to access the website or unable to attend the meeting, they'll still be able to receive the same content. With the newsletter that we submitted or distributed to the public, there was an attached survey that they can tear off, complete, and send back to us. So after reviewing the design or attending the public meeting, we can get their feedback on the project. So there was approximately 8 or 9 targeted questions included in that handout, as well as an open comment section where they could provide their feedback. As part of the public meeting on the 18th, we'll have 2 presentations, one at 6 and another at 6:45. And after each of those presentations, we'll have a Q&A session, which will be open to the public, where they can either type, call in, or raise their hand and ask a question live during the public meeting. So in terms of next steps, following the public engagement process, like Mark mentioned, we'll be able to review and compile those comments and evaluate if there's any changes that are needed to the conceptual design. The good thing about meeting with the public now is that we're very early in the process. So it's relatively easy for us to make changes in the design now. We haven't invested a lot of time and money into final design process. So it's good to get the public involved now so we can make any major changes now rather than 6 months or 12 months down the road once we're in final design. As Mark mentioned, we're hoping to begin right-of-way acquisition as early as 2022, but potentially in 2023 as well. And then due to the number of parcels along this corridor, we anticipate that right-of-way could take anywhere from 1 to 2 years. So we're looking at starting construction somewhere between 2023 and 2025. That's it for my presentations. I'll open it to questions. I will note for anyone that's listening on the YouTube channel, I've been told that they can insert their questions via the comments toolbar.
Anyone with any questions?
I have the design plans here as well, if you'd like to look through those briefly at any specific locations along the corridor.
Very good.
Can we get a copy of that?
Absolutely.
Just
I think your designs look good. I like them.
Thank you.
Look forward to moving forward with the project.
Thank you very much. We look forward to working with you.
All right.
No comments?
This will be a very challenging project.
Topography's pretty crazy out there.
And I'd like for Mark, if I could, just very quickly to give you an update on the other 2 bond projects, very quickly.
Okay.
This group is coming in and set up.
Yes, just very quickly, our other 2 transportation bond projects are Washington Street relocation over near Penn Griffin School, where Washington Street runs along parallel to the railroad cut, and we've had issues with erosion of the slopes there of the railroad cut. Our consultant for that project they have basically completed the roadway element of that, and right now we're working through some utility issues with a very large water line, and also working with Piedmont Natural Gas on gas line relocation along there. But it's going very well, and we anticipate having those plans certainly completed probably later this summer and being ready to move forward with that. On that particular project, there is only one very small parcel of right-of-way that needs to be obtained. The remaining pieces are temporary construction easements, and Kim Thor, our right-of-way agent, has already started working with some of the property owners there for those easements. The remainder of the road, all of the road will remain within North Carolina Railroad right-of-way, so there are no issues there. And we are reviewing now an agreement between the city, North Carolina Railroad, and Norfolk Southern that will allow the project to go forward, with the city doing the roadway piece and North Carolina Railroad and Norfolk Southern doing the slopes and the track level improvements that need to be made. The other bond project is Burton Road, out off of Westchester and out to the Davidson County line. It is a project that would look very similar to this, with the addition of curb and gutter and bike lanes and sidewalk on both sides of the road on a very heavily used pedestrian and transit route. Engineering Services is doing the design for that in-house, and those design plans are probably at about the 90 to 95% stage. So we're ready very soon to move forward with right-of-way acquisition on that, and engineering will be putting together the contract document so that project can be put out to bid as soon as we have the right-of-way completed. Happy to answer any questions about either of those projects.
Mark, this is Councilman Jefferson. In regards to the Washington Street project, I want to ask two questions. One is about timeline. I know some of this is, you got to negotiate and figure out things. You got a lot of moving parts, a lot of moving parties, and things you got to be diligent and thorough about. But if you have any idea on timeline, we'd love to hear that. Then the other piece is around the bridge. We recognize the bridge and its height. It just doesn't clear what the railroad has to have there. But in some of those early conversations, the railroad mentioned at least rebuilding a pedestrian bridge there. I heard you mention they'll be doing slope and track, but you didn't mention the bridge. Is that still a part of what they're planning to do?
The Downing Street Bridge is not a part of the Washington Street relocation project. It's certainly, there's an impact on one end of it, and there'll be some improvements at one end of it, but we're talking separately with North Carolina Railroad about the old Downing Street Bridge and what we can do to as an interim measure before we can get another structure built there. We have requested a new structure through NCDOT for a pedestrian-only bridge to be installed there, with the removal of the Downing Street Bridge, which, as you said, doesn't meet the vertical and horizontal clearance requirements. Right now, there's not a time frame for that, but we are hopeful that we can move that along, and the railroad has indicated that they will definitely work with us on the timeline for that particular piece of it. The roadway project should be ready to move forward sometime later this late summer, early fall. It's just a matter of securing those easements that I mentioned and resolving some of the utility issues that we've got along there where the road is now, and getting all of that moved over. So hopefully by the end of the year, that project will be under construction.
And that street, with all that construction, will be shut down for throughway traffic, I imagine. Around how long will that, I mean, I know some of the stuff you can't really tell, but is there a range?
There will be times when the street will probably need to be completely closed for construction. It'll be easier to build the road in that particular area since we're constrained on the railroad side so much. But we would hope that we'll be able to maintain at least one direction of traffic for most of the time. We really would like to have started the project in the middle of the summer when there's no school going on there, but with the utility conflicts that we've had, we may be missing that window this time around, but we'll have to work around that. The good news is there are some alternative ways into the Penn Griffin property that we can utilize.
And I imagine a number of our conversations include them being at the table. Obviously, with the road moving over into the property, there was that conversation, but we've been pretty, I would assume, pretty communicative with them on all that, and that
Absolutely. We've had a number of field meetings out there at the school with the principal and with representatives of Guilford County Schools and their facilities and right-of-way divisions regarding all of that.
Have we, and I don't know when it's the appropriate time, but I guess, I know we've talked about Washington Street with our community, but are we scheduling another public meeting to update them on this timeline and some of this stuff with maybe the neighborhood association, business association?
Yes, we'll be coming back to you with another meeting similar to this for both Burton Road and Washington Street in the next couple of months or so.
And then from there, we can figure out how to communicate that.
Right. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Appreciate your interest and your time today.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, next on the agenda, I believe, is an update from our Parks and Rec staff for the City Lake Park renovation project. That, I believe we're going to hear from Lee Tillery.
Lisa, or to Mary? Which one is it?
Call. Winnie on Friday. Call. Come on,
Think about it.
Thank you.
Talk fast. Yeah. A lot of trees left, yes, sir.
Every order for that's going to change over.
So either one will work. Good afternoon. Randy's already given me the direction to talk fast, so I'm going to take care of that. Hope you are doing well. It's good to see everyone. I'd like to introduce the group who is here with us tonight before we start talking about City Lake Park. And don't worry, I won't be speaking the whole time. We have others speaking, so it'll be a lot more interesting. But with HH Architecture, we have Janessa Van Deen and Kristen Hess, and they have been working on architectural plans or the design plans for this project. And I'll talk to you a little bit about their role and how long they've been here. We also have staff, Parks and Recreation staff, Tracy Pegram and Colton Marble have been working as far as the team on this particular project and with Greg and I. And then we also have representatives from Samet, our Seymour on the project. So we got Adam Carden, Maurice McNeil. So I wanted to introduce them. Adam will be speaking some towards the end as well. What we want to show you guys today is what we have been working on for the last year with City Lake Parks and the renovations associated with the bond project. So we're going to take y'all through that. I was a little hesitant to send out the book with the pretty pictures before I started speaking because it's a little easier to read that than listen to us. But that we're going to take you through exactly where we've been and what we're doing now. If you guys will remember, this was part of our 2018, the recommendation to develop a site plan for City Lake Park was part of our 2018 comprehensive master plan. So we did that in 2019. With the help of McAdams, we developed a site plan for renovations and what we need to do with City Lake Park moving forward. It broke that plan down into 2 phases. That was, of course, about a year-long, about 6 months it took us to develop that plan, brought it to our Parks and Recreation Commission and our council. Last year, when the pandemic hit, we felt like with some uncertainty around the pool and operations of the pool last year, it would be best to start those plans. So we contracted with HH Architecture in was it April of 2020, March, April of 2020, and began those plans. They took us through the 3 phases of it, working with our team from schematic design, design development, all the way through construction documentation. So those plans are actually complete, and they were complete as of April 4th. Also early in April, as you guys will recall, we brought on, we did an RFQ process and for a contractor on this particular job. We did interviews and recommended salmon, which you guys approved, I believe at our y'all's first meeting in April. So that's kind of where we are now. And we want to take y'all through these plans real quickly so you guys can see what we've been up to and what it looks like. And I'll turn it over to them here in just a second. To give you a little bit of history of the park, tell you a little bit about existing conditions. I mentioned that 2019 master plan. We'll talk a little bit about the renovation, or a lot about the renovation and what it looks like. We'll be able to show you guys some renderings. And we'll talk about schedule. The reason we're here today and the reason we're moving forward as quickly as we can is that we've said all along we'd like to have this pool open in Memorial Day of 2022. So we got a year at least for that part. If we have to phase part of the project, we can, but to have that pool ready in 2022 is what we're shooting for, and that would, of course, with the pool not being open last summer and not being open this summer, that would be two summers without the swimming pool. But our goal is to Memorial Day of 2022. You guys may or may not know, but parts of City Lake, the gymnasium, the old gymnasium, the locker rooms, and the pool, as well as portions of Washington Terrace Park, were built in the 30s under President Roosevelt's WPA program. So it was Depression-led labor that actually that actually did the work on that pool at City Lake and the gymnasium building. You can see that in that top photo. So it is a cool historical fact, but it also give you a little insight into how old this park is and the things that we have to do to continue to maintain this park. But there's a lot of history, a lot of cool pictures, a lot of interesting facts about the WPA and what it did here in High Point and City Lake and Washington Terrace are certainly a part of that. You can see a little bit of the timeline where we are today. We've made adjustments with the pool over the years. A lot of you who have lived in High Point all your life have seen the transformation with the pool. You can remember diving boards, different things we had with City Lake and the pool. A deeper pool, we made some adjustments. I think it was about 15 years ago to make it so the pool wasn't so deep. In 1994 had a major renovation, and of course in 2019 we completed the site plan that we're referring to. Here's a little idea of what we're talking about, and this will take you through, and you can probably see it a little bit better on your handouts. But the project scope is really laid out here, and the focus is really on the pool, the locker rooms, and the gymnasium building, which we're recommending we transform into a multi-purpose building with restrooms and offices. So you can see how that's changed. You can see a new parking lot behind the building. You can see really the change, the trajectory of the park with the Great Lawn now facing the amusement area. So we'll start talking about that in this presentation and what that looks like, so you can see a little bit more of that in depth. And I'm going to turn it over to Kristen with HH to take this part of the presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Kristen Hess with HH Architecture, and I'm grateful to be with you. I'm grateful to work on this really important project. Janessa, you can just go ahead and join me. That way we're tag teaming, because we're going to do this presentation together. I want to start out by telling you that this, like Lee said, that there's so much age on this building, and we tried to include some pictures that, I don't know how many of you've been down in the spaces lately, but there's a lot of problems. A lot of deferred maintenance and a lot of old systems. You know, systems that just aren't designed to live forever. And so, you know, you have electrical systems that don't meet code and you can't get parts for them anymore. We have structural issues that are quite dangerous. So we're really recommending a total gut here. We're not saving the guts of the building, the plumbing of the building, the electrical of the building, the HVAC of the building. We're really recommending some pretty robust solutions. The gymnasium, you know, I'm sure was amazing in its heyday, but now doesn't have air conditioning, so you're gonna have a hard time renting that out, you know, at this point, when people are so spoiled and used to having all the amenities that we're used to today. And then we just have general wear and tear, you know, things need to be overhauled just for the sake of, you know, breathing new life and giving it a new facelift. So Janessa is going to walk you through a little bit of the high-level scope, and then we'll tag team.
Before you go to there real quick, this is Councilman Moore, and maybe from cost hadn't been looked at, but with all the negative that you just stated, which is all true, you consider taking it to the ground and starting over?
Yeah, I mean, that was discussed, but I think it's such a rich history, and I don't think that, I just don't think it's worth doing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, the history of the space is what we really wanted to preserve, right? There's, the stonework is beautiful. There's a lot of importance when you look at this space, and even the configuration of the pool and the shape of the pool all resonates with all of us and with many people that come to this area, that it was really important that we save what we can and help enhance it with the new work.
But I still think it would have been more costly. You know, what's crazy is when you, and y'all know this, you think it'll be cheaper to tear down and start over, but then you just try to make it bigger and do more. There's these three little words, they're called might as well. And clients, you know, they just start going, well, if we're gonna build it from scratch, might as well do it right. And then we do this, then we do that, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, then we kill the project. So I'm not saying that y'all would have done that. You might have had discipline, but I think it was worth saving, is the honest answer, and we did look at that.
All right.
Okay, next slide.
All right, so this is really just kind of a zoomed out version, view of the entire park. And while we focus a lot on what Lee talked about, given the pool and the gymnasium and the locker room area, there is some components of the project that stretch to, you know, connect us with the Greenway connection and a pedestrian bridge across the lake. Focusing on the building, we looked at the pool, gymnasium, and locker room all as one part, one project scope. And then, as identified in the master plan, an event lawn for gatherings and for special events. And then also, alternate 2 is noted as kind of a loop road that helps the overall park connectivity. And all of this would kind of seamlessly translate into when phase 2 of the master plan is incorporated. So we're teeing ourselves up for that future project. Wanting to take a look at each of the components, given, again, it's, you know, thinking of the project in 3 separate components, the site improvements. So what we're going to do there is add additional parking for the swimming pool, and importantly, add ADA connectivity down from, you know, the current way is not accessible to get down to the pool. So really wanting to enhance that connection. And then we've highlighted sort of a plaza, an entry area, so that really help with wayfinding and also help with, you know, community events, concerts, outdoor gatherings can happen there, and imagine people sitting out in the event lawn. It's going to be a really wonderful enhanced space. And then utilizing what we have with the current park shelters, we can do a loop road to add additional parking and connectivity to the rest of the park there. So this is just a couple of images, kind of let you know where the design had taken.
This is that new plaza, like
So
the pool is over here.
Yeah, so there's quite a bit of, you know, obviously, given there's a gymnasium level and down below there's a locker room level, so we have quite a bit of topography to span. So what we came up with was kind of this great connectivity area where people could play and rest and interact with one another on this intermediate plaza area.
I also think this could be a nice destination for a rental, you know, a family gathering or a corporate event or something like that, depending on how you want to use it. And I know you don't want to lock people out of it, but there could be times that you could use that as a revenue generation tool as well.
So then focusing on the swimming pool, that being the largest draw to the park, really wanting to make sure that we enhance it and do it correctly, right? A lot of the components of the pool are no longer being manufactured, so there are, to begin with, just some you know, maintenance things that we need to address. Looking at four different components. One closest to the buildings being a splash pad for children of all ages. Still maintaining the 50-meter competition pool. And we're going to do that by actually raising up the entire pool deck area. That'll help with some ADA barriers that we currently have, and also help bring that pool up to the code depth that's required. Transforming the southern part of the pool into a zero barrier entrance lifestyle pool with a lazy river as sort of a attraction draw. And then also adding one slide, being a stand-up water slide. So you can see all of those components. Really trying to utilize what we, you know, staying within the footprint so that it's still that symbolic shape that we've all known to grow and love.
Pardon me, does that slide into water? I couldn't tell what I was looking at. Is that a sidewalk?
So it's similar to what the current slides are. It slides into like a splash area, but not into a pool.
Oh, okay.
Does that make sense?
I think do we have a picture later?
I believe there is a picture. So this is really just some precedent images, and imagining, you know, obviously people playing and interacting in this space, but then when we start to look at how people will view it from the gymnasium level and from above, wanting to really make this an interactive space even at night. Here's some of the pool features on that zero depth entry to help attract people of all ages and, you know, give everybody a space and room to play. And then the lazy river. So having a multitude of activities and attractions there. And there's an image of kind of the precedent for the water slide.
Like surfing?
Like surfing. Pretty
Never
cool.
seen that in my life. That's
I
really
know.
cool.
You're going to be.
It would be the
so
only one in North Carolina, just so you know.
Yes.
I will make it 3/4 of the way down before I break my leg. Wow.
Castle people have their sign release.
I'll support it if Cyril's the first person to go there.
You want him to break his leg first? That's really cool.
Okay, so moving to the building. So this shows you kind of the lower level of the building, and what is there now is the locker rooms on the side wings. And what's not there yet, but what we're planning is this top little bar that kind of fits under the overhang where the gym is. And in concept, the door is still in the same place. You know, you come in, it's much better configuration in terms of safety and sight lines and being able to check in and so forth, come through the lobby and then onto the pool deck. And in general concept, this side is women and this side is men. And then we have special areas for staff, which is really needed, you know, because right now, staff are required to take a break, but, you know, when the public sees the staff sitting around, they sort of jump to conclusions about why are they sitting here when I need help, but they really need to take a break so they can do well at their job. So we've provided a special place for staff, and then also a whole family section with single occupancy toilets and family restrooms and lockers for everybody and concessions. So just making it so that any blended family, anybody across any spectrum can use this and feel safe and comfortable, which is a nice response to everybody, I feel like. And then if we go to the before and afters, this is what it looks like today. And then we did a rendering to show you some of the design features. So, you know, coming in and having lovely furniture, which we know you can get your hands on pretty easily around here, and some beautiful splash pad, like Janessa said, with lighting, but also bringing back this deck, this balcony. That is what people remember. That's the nostalgia of this building, is being on that balcony or deck and looking out over the pool. And so that's going to be a real draw. That's going to be a fun place to be. I think it's all going to be fun because you're going to see it from so many angles. As Janessa mentioned too, we have all these ramps and we have a lot of barriers for folks, and when we redo it, oops, I went too quick. What did I do? There it is. Now you have, you know, nice awnings, no ramps, everything's open, everybody can go everywhere without having to go around their elbow to get to their wrist and so forth. And again, a lot of nice seating and shade. So it just kind of gives you two views from different angles at that point. And then here's the main entry point now. And this is how we're reimagining it with a canopy. And if you can imagine that wall, it's kind of the way up is to the gym and straight ahead is the pool entry. And of course the gym also has an accessible entrance around from the other side to the same point. And then the locker room currently is, you know, just kind of dated, and now we're showing a new dressed up opportunity, new ceilings, new lighting, new fixtures, new lockers, everything new, everything fresh, everything clean. And then the old locker rooms themselves, and just giving them a facelift as well. Also new ventilation, which is going to make a big difference. How it smells and how it feels from a humidity standpoint can make a big difference in how we perceive a space. It's not just all about the paint. So I want to reassure you that we're doing a lot more than just lipstick. It's all new systems. And then if you're upstairs, now what was the old gym, you know, if you've been in there, it's just a big open space, but what we're doing is converting it into a community center. So you have the entrance with a airlock vestibule and lobby. You have large restrooms, which can be locked in or out from either side. Like if you wanted to have outdoor events in the park and the center was closed, you could lock the bathrooms to the building side and use them for the park, and vice versa. If you want it to be just for the building, you can do that, or you can do both. You can lock the wall. I've got Janessa designed a wall right there with lockable doors, so you could have park toilets and, you know, party goers who have paid to rent the building, and the two can't mingle, which is also a nice feature. But then when you're cleaning and when you're trying to maintain it and all that, you know, you'll have your access. So a couple of offices with nice sight lines in view of the entry. This large assembly room with tables and chairs. It's a subdividable room with a partition. So you can have two smaller rooms or one big one with some audio video. And it's about 117, you said?
Yeah, 115.
115 with tables and chairs, and then it'd be like 170 if you just did like rows of seating. So you have a rather large gathering in there, which I think will be nice for the community and be very desirable. Small conference room and a warming kitchen so that you can have your catering come in, and then some storage for chairs. It's pretty simple, a nice community center. But what's really great is when you come out onto that balcony right there. That's going to be really fun. So here's the side of the building right now with that's where you currently go in right there. And here's kind of the newly imagined, this is what's in the design drawings. Restoring it to its heyday and bringing along all the creature comforts that we're all used to. Occupiable roof decks, great views, safety, fun. Just going to be a great place to be. It's already a great place to be. It's going to be an even better place to be. And then for the interior rendering, got the old, you know, sort of gymnasium, you know, bars on the windows kind of stuff. Now we can have a really beautiful entry. there's that, you know, big room, and then you can just kind of hint, you can kind of see, you'd be watching that water slide, you'd be watching people surf down that water slide in the distance. That'd be pretty neat. But we'll also have some shades on the windows, so if we need to avoid distractions.
Thought of it all.
Tried to think of it all.
And then just finishing on some of the site elements, these are just some precedent images for what we're thinking of for that pedestrian bridge connection.
Yeah. So, schedule, you guys want to come up here and talk about schedule? All right.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Adam Carden with Salmon Corporation, along with our project manager, Maurice McNeil. I wanted to say how excited we are to see this amenity available for High Point families, and I'm willing to go down the water slide right after Cyril and Vic, but before Wesley. No, we were selected as the construction manager at risk for this project thanks to our very local relevant pool experience and park experience. We're working on something very similar for the Greensboro Science Center in Greensboro's Battleground Park District. So we already have a lot of input from our local vendors working on a similar project. And also thanks to our outreach. We have a very authentic outreach into our minority and women-owned business enterprise community, and we already have an outreach scheduled for tomorrow night. So we anticipate engaging in our contractors, our vendors, and those relationships and breaking down a lot of these larger packages. You're going to see a lot of concrete work, a lot of grading work, and we've already worked with Maurice's team and found ways to break it up into smaller chunks and continue our track record of getting a lot of local and MWB participation on this project, thanks to unbundling the work. And the early package that we're looking at today is a quick release of the early site, the demo, the steel, and the fabricated canopies, because we have a very aggressive schedule to try to have this ready for Memorial Day next year and have the families enjoying it. So that's why we're just light speed, outreach tomorrow night, unbundle the work, get ready to rock. And so if anyone can deliver it, it's Maurice, and I'll let him kind of summarize the schedule.
All right, thanks, Adam.
Yeah, pressure's on now.
No problem, no pressure. We're so grateful to be here. Adam asked me to talk about the schedule, but just a personal connection to this project. When I first moved here to North Carolina, my daughter, who's 24 years old, I brought her to this park when she was 6 years old, and also her 4 younger siblings. So as far as the schedule, it's been a long time coming. We're very excited to see this project. We think that HH Architecture has a very beautiful, magnificent design, and that the Parks and Recreation had a great vision for this project. It is a very aggressive schedule, and that's something that we at Salmon Corporation embrace. We've been involved with very many types of projects that are complicated in their scope, and there's not really a whole lot of time to do them, so that is something that we're very familiar with. The way we're going to approach this project, as Adam alluded to, we started as soon as we were selected, as far as reaching out to contractors that we have relationships with, contractors that are new to us, that were recommended by the design team for certain aspects of this project that we don't necessarily see every day, to go ahead and engage them. We're, of course, having a mixer tomorrow night where we will reach out to the minority, women-owned business community, and also to majority firms and larger MWBE firms to connect people together. And by unbundling the packages, basically taking things that were, for example, the concrete would be a large portion of this project. But we'll bid that in 2 separate packages, where one is site concrete with sidewalks and one is the pool deck. And as far as our team approach to the project, we anticipate no less than 6-day work week, because we know as residents here in Guilford County and people that partake in enjoying this park and the train and all the other things that you can do there, and then as a community going through what we have in the last year, we can't wait to get this park back open either, and to be able to see people out there and enjoying themselves. And the Memorial Day date to us is a hard date, and we intend to make that happen. And if that's 7 days, if that's 15-hour days, that's what we're going to do. And that's something that we bring to the table. We will definitely approach this project with an aggressive schedule, but we also will keep in mind and keep a close eye on the quality of work that goes in place, the safety of the workers while they put that in place. So all of those things we'll do together, and it's just part of the standard way of doing business. And we're excited about being a part of this project. We look forward to not only tonight's meeting, but kicking it off with some of the subcontractor community tomorrow night, and then we're just going to go from there. But allowing us to bid some of these packages early will really give us the opportunity to procure some of the items that are long lead time, and that's the biggest thing that there's several different things in the market right now, but that's one of the biggest things that we're seeing as a general contractor, is that some items are taking much longer to get than they would even 6 months ago. So we're very appreciative for the opportunity to be here tonight, and ask for your blessing of the project as a whole, and in particular the early site work, because that's the first thing for the aggressive schedule to happen, is to get your approval, and we're appreciative of having an opportunity to make our case.
So we certainly would be happy to address any of the components of the component GMP. Let me talk about that process a little bit. This is an early release package, just like we did with the police station, to get some things ordered, started, and demoed. I look back, and the police station was about $5 million worth of work that got started prior to the final GMP, guaranteed maximum price. We anticipate having that around June for the council to consider. What's happening what's been happening is the process of them finding subs and contractors, and then they're going through their bidding process in compliance with state law. They'll have those figures. They've got estimates already, but we do not have a GMP today because we're not to that point in the process. A couple things that are happening. We know and see and are very much aware of the construction pricing increases that are going on. This project is subject to that as much as any because we use a lot of metal, or are proposing to use metal in this project. There's things like wood certainly used in this project. So right now the project on paper is higher than where it needs to be. We're going to be working with Samet over the next 30 days to look at some of the alternates that you saw on the screen. This project has a pedestrian bridge that goes across the lake. That is an alternate. It's the event lawn, the parking, some of those things are alternates. So we will have that priced out as an alternate by the contractors. Those numbers will come back, and we'll actually have a hard number for each of those pieces. And then staff intends to come back to the city council with a recommended package. And there'll be some things probably out that you saw on the screen today, and hopefully there'll be a lot of that that's in. But we don't have a firm number. We know it's going to be over our projections, which were created, I think, around two or 3 years ago. We were talking about that today. Just the process of sizing a bond package usually work from the maximum number down to how much you can allocate per area, and that's what happens. You get a number, but it's not the cost of a deliverable. So the bond has $9.5 million. The package is $9.5 for parks. That doesn't mean that that was all that was ever intended to be spent on this particular project. So before the headline becomes it's over budget, that was not necessarily the budget for that park. And we do have alternates that are built in here. So about $6 million worth of work in the first package, the component package, and we can talk about any of those if you have questions.
Anyone? Thank you.
Mayor, I don't have any questions, but just a couple comments. Very, very appreciative of this presentation. Always love that Samet takes a very intentional approach to what you all do to engage contractors from all across our community. And I think that's very important for how we continue to move forward. Love what HH did to make this look so fun and really recoup that history. And Lee, I used to think Parks and Rec always went last because you were just on Randy's crap list. But now I know why, because if anyone else goes after Parks and Rec, we're all going to be sleeping. No, I'm kidding. That was a joke. That was a joke. Of the purpose. I am really excited. This is so much fun, and just looking forward to it all. I did not volunteer to go down first. Let the minutes reflect. I did not volunteer to go down first, but I look forward to it. Seriously.
Ward 1, man.
No, that's not Ward 1.
Can I ask Lee a quick question? Where in the existing greenway does the bridge connect?
So the proposed connection would be where the old American Legion building was, the property that we purchased in the past year. So the bicentennial makes its way all the way down there, Wesley. So the connection would be there and then would connect to what we call the Camp Ann side of the park. So you wouldn't be on the side nearest the pool, you'd actually be on the opposite side of the park. But to provide that connectivity, you know, you could get on your bike from Armstrong and go all the way into City Lake Park with that connectivity now, and then you can go back to the PDC and the Bicentennial Greenway all the way up to Gallimore Dairy Road. So the connection there would be really huge.
Is that where the McLean Center was? Right across the lake?
I'm not sure. Not sure.
Anything else? Any other questions?
Just make sure the lazy river width is sufficient.
We can do that. Yeah, we can do that. Thank y'all.
Who's gonna be out there working?
Okay.
Lazy river, that's all you get.
Is there anything else for this meeting?
No, sir.
Okay. All right. Well, we have about 15 minutes, I think, till the next meeting starts. So I'll just need a motion to adjourn.
Second.
A motion made by Councilman Jefferson and seconded by Councilman Williams. Is there anyone who is in opposition to adjourning the meeting? Okay, hearing none, this meeting's adjourned and we'll reconvene in 15 minutes.
So Randy, is this part of your